In a world where agony is the only currency for survival, one man discovered the horrifying truth. The stale air in his room carried the metallic scent of old blood and the faint, sickly sweetness of decay. His skin felt perpetually cold and clammy, as if the very moisture was being drawn from his cells against their will. Every night, a faint scratching would begin inside the walls. Not rats, but something that mimicked the rhythm of his own slowing pulse. Doctors called it a medical impossibility, a body consuming itself, yet sustained only by moments of sheer, excruciating suffering. He learned to measure his life not in days, but in the sharp intakes of breath that followed a fresh cut or a broken bone. The whispers started soon after. Not voices, but the sound of his own parched tissues grinding together with every movement. This is the story of a man who had to choose: die peacefully or live in perpetual, calculated torment. This wasn't some poetic exaggeration. For one man, it became a horrifying physical reality that defied every known medical boundary. His ordeal challenged the very limits of human endurance, and by its conclusion, you'll question what true survival demands as payment. In a quiet Austin suburb, David Miller appeared to his neighbors as an ordinary man in his late 40s. A former graphic designer, he maintained a tidy yard and shared his home with his dog, Buddy. His life seemed a portrait of suburban normalcy, defined by simple routines and quiet evenings. But beneath that placid surface, something else stirred, waiting to fracture the calm. He appeared ordinary, but within David, a conflict was about to ignite. It began suddenly. A parched mouth that water failed to soothe. A metallic tang lingered on his tongue, sharp and unsettling. The air in the room felt thick, carrying a faint, sour scent of decay. The first warning was a strange metallic tang on his tongue, sharp and unnatural. Doctors ran a gauntlet of tests, their sterile rooms humming with quiet dread. The diagnosis was as rare as it was cruel: advanced Sjogren's syndrome. His immune system had declared war on his own body, and his saliva was the first casualty, vanishing into a dry, aching void. Then, the glands that kept his eyes moist began to fail. But this was no ordinary deterioration. It advanced with savage, relentless speed. Within months, David's body could no longer process water, not a single drop. Every attempt to drink water, juice, even saline solution would trigger violent, crippling spasms in his digestive tract. His stomach and intestines would reject it like poison, twisting in silent agony. He was diagnosed with a catastrophic comorbidity, a total acquired aquagenic intolerance. Water, the source of all life, was now his toxin. The medical team was completely stumped. A human can survive only days without hydration. David was discharged with a terminal prognosis and no recourse. Time was rapidly dwindling. As his body withered, a desperate biological imperative surged through him. The thirst became a torment he later likened to inhaling fine, abrasive dust. His skin split in hairline fissures, each one radiating a dull, persistent ache. In the quiet room, the only sounds were the faint rasp of his breathing and the dry rustle of his movements against the sheets. His joints seized, locking him in place. Every conversation became a rasping ordeal. Each word dragged painfully from his throat, but his eyes reacted differently. They still held life. Though damaged, his lacrimal glands would still produce tears in response to the sheer trauma of his predicament. These were not lubricating tears, but the hot, saline tears of sheer suffering. One night, as he writhed in bed, that tear traced a path through the dust on his cheek. It finally touched his parched, cracked lips. A revelation, a salt sting. To his shock, there was no pain, no violent rebellion from his stomach. That solitary tear, born from utter despair, was the only moisture his body wouldn't violently reject. With shaking fingers, he began the meticulous, horrifying ritual of collection. And so, the dreadful new routine took its first, chilling breath. David became an architect of his own sorrow. He forced himself to watch old family videos, read devastating news stories, and mentally revisit every loss. He would gently stimulate his eyes not to lubricate, but to weep. He had to harvest his own grief to survive. It took hours of concentrated misery to fill a single teaspoon with tears. Only Sarah, who checked on him daily, ever saw it. He kept the small glass container on his kitchen table, calling it his life. It was never full, and the worst part was his eyes, constantly wet with effort, yet profoundly hollow, as if he were mining his own soul for fuel. David was vanishing before us. The man who once loved graphic design, now unable to endure even a moment staring at a screen without excruciating pain. The air in his workspace grew thick with the scent of ozone and stale coffee, a tangible reminder of his deteriorating condition. Each attempt to focus was met with a low, persistent hum that seemed to emanate from the very walls, amplifying his torment. Buddy the dog would whimper and lick David's parched hands, sensing the unnatural change but not understanding it. David was becoming a phantom, sustained only by the salt leaching from his own evaporating existence. After 11 agonizing weeks, his body finally gave out. The only sound in the sterile room was the slow, irregular beep of a monitor counting down his final moments. He arrived at the emergency room, a skeleton draped in paper-dry skin. His body was shutting down, systems failing one by one. The medical team braced for the end, the sterile air thick with the scent of antiseptic and decay. But against all expectation, his vitals held steady. The medical team was confounded. His sodium levels were critically high. Yet he displayed none of the expected neurological symptoms of severe dehydration. It was as if his physiology had rewritten its own fundamental rules. The sterile air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and the palpable weight of the inexplicable. Sarah, her desperation palpable, finally revealed the small vial hidden in his jacket pocket. A doctor held the container up to the sterile light, its few drops of liquid catching the glare. His voice, stunned and hollow, echoed in the room. "You're telling us this is all for months?" In that antiseptic brightness, the horrifying reality solidified. David Miller had not been living. His body had entered a state of perpetual, conscious mummification, a final, desperate act of biological defiance. It had become a closed-loop system, recycling the scant tears produced from his body's last reserves and his mind's profound trauma. This minute, just sufficient cycle, sustained his brain and heart at a subterranean level of function. He was no longer a man, but a living Ouroboros, the ancient serpent condemned to forever consume its own tail. David's existence had become a brutal cycle. Agony, a fleeting sip of relief, then deeper agony. Barely conscious, his voice was a dry rasp to the lead physician. "David, I'm not thirsty anymore. I just hurt." The conclusion. In a specialized hospice room, David now lies surrounded by the faint, sterile scent of ozone, connected to lines of humidified air. He peered through the rain-streaked glass, watching the downpour blur the world beyond. There was no cure. Only palliative care to ease his suffering. Specialized lipids dripped through an IV to sustain him, while humidifiers fought the constant moisture loss from his paper-thin skin. The air grew heavy with the scent of antiseptic and damp fabric, a sterile tomb masking the body's slow decay. The paradox remained absolute. The very element sustaining his life would extinguish it. For 5 more months, David's existence was confined to that single, stagnant room. He adhered to his grim pact, never allowing a single drop to pass his lips. Eventually, even his body's final plea for mercy ceased, his tear ducts surrendering to a permanent, dusty drought. His body had finally run out of both moisture and the will to cry. David Miller passed away, not from thirst in the conventional sense, but from the exhaustion of his own emotional and physical resources. He didn't die of drought. He died because the well of his suffering finally ran dry. The final image is a small glass vial, empty and forgotten on a dusty windowsill, pierced by a single shaft of morning light. A haunting question lingers in the still air. David survived by consuming his own grief. But was his survival a testament to strength? Or was his prolonged life the disease's final, most profound symptom? He transmuted his agony into nourishment, a bitter sustenance. That grim truth makes me question, what secret hungers do we feed within ourselves? What quiet, consuming thing are we using to stay alive, even as it devours us from within? Think about that. Until next time.